property prices in Brisbane are now the second most expensive of all our capital cities. Just in the last 12 months alone, prices have risen 15.3%. But now we're starting to see predictions that prices could rise another 50%. So today, I'm going to look through these predictions from multiple angles. I'm going to then dive into the data to see exactly where these predictions can be supported, and finally, whether the Brisbane property market is something you should consider. Let's get started. Hello, it's Nero here, and if you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button because I talk about all things related to the Australian property market and the economy. Massive 50% price rise predicted ahead of 2032 Olympics. Experts have predicted a 50% rise in home prices ahead of the 2032 Olympics as over $75 million was spent on Sunday alone in a special 112 home mass auction, one of the biggest Brisbane has seen. The Ray White Brisbane 100, celebrating the group's century of operation in the Queensland capital, saw $75.25 million spent across a 6-hour auction marathon with 402 registered bidders. It followed an expert panel that flagged significant gains ahead for Brisbane. REA Group CEO Owen Wilson predicted a 50% price rise ahead of the 2032 Olympics as tracking continued to show major demand heading into southeast Queensland. It's just pure supply-demand economics. If you've got more people wanting to move into an area and wanting to purchase property, that is absolutely going to underpin prices, he said. I think we will see the highest population growth in Australia in this area up to the Olympics and probably beyond. And therefore we will see, I think, fantastic price appreciation. We've done 45% in the last 3 years. I think my prediction is minimum 50% rise, and then who knows if it might double. Ray White Managing Director Dan White agreed, saying it's almost done that without the Olympics in the last 5 years. He expected to see the Olympic effect continue to lift prices for years across southeast Queensland after 2032, similar to what Sydney, where growth continued over years and years afterwards. Now, of course, you might be skeptical by this because after all of these reports are from sales agents, and of course their job is to pump up their property markets. So let's now have a look at what a senior economist had to say about the Brisbane property market. Diana Musina, economist at AMP, has issued a new report on the national housing market, pointing out that New South Wales and Queensland have an undersupply of new housing. In contrast, Victoria is in the rare position of having an oversupply. Her report finds undersupply in Queensland and New South Wales is the key factor driving prices higher. In other words, not enough properties for the number of people who want to live there. Now, you might still be skeptical because after all, this is from someone who works at a bank, and we know that banks have made all sorts of predictions in the past and they've been horribly wrong. So then let's have a look at what the university research has to say. Migration behind Queensland house price surge. Experts. Queensland's soaring population combined with a severe lack of supply has put the state at the epicenter of Australia's housing crisis, a leading academic and industry figures say. A new report analysing Queensland's market has laid bare the significant strain from interstate and international migration that has continued to push both house and rental prices to record levels. University of New South Wales professor Hal Pawson, who was commissioned by the Queensland Council of Social Service to author the study, said the growth in private rental dwellings in Brisbane has been flat for nearly 4 years. And what he means by that is the number of properties being built in this particular segment. The lack of supply has crunched vacancy rates and created an unaffordable rental market, while new price data shows another rise in the city's dwelling prices. Queensland, more than any other state, is at the epicenter of the upsurge in the housing system stress, Professor Pawson told the Australian Financial Review. Queensland has some of the most extreme indicators on price inflation, both house prices and rents, so the pressure is really on this state. The state has attracted a consistent stream of both interstate and international migrants over the past quarter century, but this accelerated since the beginning of the pandemic. In the 3.5 years after COVID broke out, though, the state's population increased by 6.6%, while Australia grew 4.7%. So that's actually an extra 50% in terms of the rate of growth. And Queensland had more interstate migrants than any other jurisdiction in 2022 to 2023. And with those sorts of supply shortages, it's no wonder we see headlines like this talking about how Queensland has more tent cities than any other state in the country. There just isn't enough accommodation there right now. When we look at this data from Matuzik, we can see that annual sales are currently 48,500 in southeast Queensland, but there are only about 20,000 properties for sale, which means there's only enough supply for 4.9 months. And you can see here that the number of vacant dwellings is amongst the lowest it's ever been in Queensland, and the vacancy rate is continuing to fall. So there is significant demand from tenants, not enough properties for rent. So when we look at this chart from Macro Business, we can see Brisbane home values have increased significantly, but look at the direction. They're still rising significantly. So it's no wonder then that people are saying that prices could rise 50% or more by 2032, which is when Brisbane holds the Olympics, and many people are saying that could be conservative. And as you can see in this next chart from SQM Research, the lack of rental properties in Queensland is continuing to drive rents higher as well. So if you're a property investor, this is a unique opportunity where you can buy in a market where prices are rising and rents are rising. And you can see that the housing crisis in Queensland is being driven by population change. Now, most of us think that it's net interstate migration, but as you can see in this chart, the net interstate migration, the green line, isn't sitting at record highs. What is sitting at record highs is overseas migration. Now, this is before most of the world knows that Brisbane is holding the Olympic Games. If you ask most people overseas about major cities in Australia, they'll tell you Sydney, they'll tell you Melbourne. They won't even be able to mention Canberra, which is our nation's capital. But the moment people start to realize that Brisbane is an Olympic city, the weather is better for many people coming from overseas, I expect that you'll see that Brisbane will get an even bigger share of overseas migration, placing even more demand on property. And that's why I expect prices to continue to rise in multiple areas around Queensland, because they're just not building enough homes. Here we can see in this chart, which is tracking from Macro Business, Queensland dwelling construction versus population change. You can see population change, the green line, through the roof. All the other lines which track different stages of construction are all actually falling. Again, this shows you that supply is decreasing while demand is increasing. And while that continues, I expect property prices in many areas around Brisbane, many areas around regional Queensland to continue to rise in value. And if you want to know more about how to find the best areas to rise in value, check out the link in the description below to get totally for free the audio version and digital version of my book. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.